And I did an old slideshow presentation years ago. The cassette tape would die a couple of decades back. This kind of shows you what they did for doing the repair. So what they do is they dress out the holes so the rupture is somewhat confined, so they'll trim the area of the hole. They fabricate a piece of flat stock to the dimensions that are required. Again, from the edge of the hole going forward and after, they're going to have 2 times the diameter of the tubing. And they put a short bead on either end of it, and then they use a hammer with heat in order to bend the piece of flat stock around the tubing. And then they weld on opposite quadrants in order to repair it. So it's actually somewhat complicated, not too complicated to do, but it takes a little bit of finesse to do that. So that's one type of repair. Another repair that might be done for tubing may be where the repair is beyond the limits that would be specified for that welded patch. They use a sleeve. Sleeves can be either split or they can be solid, and the decision is kind of based on if you can get the tubing around over cluster welds. So what you might do is you might take a piece of tubing and cut it in 2 along its length in order to kind of clear cluster welds that are on either side of the damage. And again, another repair that's done out of the 4313. This would be a welded sleeve repair for maybe a laundrette. Notice also, in order to increase the surface area for welding, that's what they've done in the tubing. They've got a 30-degree scarf cut in the tubing to give you more surface area for the lap weld that secures it. Also, too, the damage that has to be repaired, it's not good enough to leave the damage there. You're going to have to kind of press the hole out with a file in order to fix it. Occasionally, they'll have rosette welds that position the sleeve in place in order to kind of locate it. And then after that's been done, then they finish up by welding around the outside diameter of the tubing at the sleeve and also along the length of it. It's been split. So, but there's some info in the 4313 and also the 15 alpha to kind of show you how it's done. It can be used for bent, cracked, or dented tubing. You're still going to have to straighten the tubing out before you use this type of welded sleeve. But again, it's an option. Again, if the welded patch won't work, beyond the damage limits for a patch. I've got some. Here's an example of one. This uses a 30-degree scarf in it. And again, there are dimensions that are specified for the length of it. The diameter of the tubing is specified as D. So the patch, or I should say the sleeve, is going to extend out 1.5 tubing diameters beyond it in order to give adequate strength once it's done. If you've got a crack, the ends of the crack have to be stop drilled. They usually use a number 40 drill for most of the tubing. They don't use 1/8 inch or number 30, but something that would approximate a number 40 drill will work pretty good for at least controlling the crack if one is starting to begin. And they've got a piece of tubing positioned over it, so it's larger in diameter, probably the same wall thickness as the original tubing. And here they've got it preformed around it. This has been a split sleeve, and again, they've got a C-clamp. They're welding up each of the lengths of it, and then later what they'll do is they'll weld around the circumference of both sides of it, try to quarter weld it so that it helps to hold it, or at least that it isn't distorted. But again, it's a welded sleeve.
But if you want to put, like, when we were doing the butt joint for lab, we had to put on both ends a piece that kept them together.
This has got, sometimes what they'll use are, they'll do this.
Because it looks like it's separating apart.
It is, it's thin. But what they do in some cases is they'll use rosette welds to hold it. So you can use rosettes if you have to. There's nothing that says that you can't. So, more rosettes there for that sleeve. Hand-formed sleeves, you can do the same thing out of flat stock, but again, this is going to be time-consuming. Most people would prefer just to take a larger diameter tubing that fits over it and then split it in 2 if they had to in order to get it, but there's nothing that says that you can't use flat stock to make the patch, or make the sleeve. Next, what if the tubing is so badly damaged that it can't be patched or sleeved? Well, what we're forced to do now is we're actually forced to splice. If the tubing has been so badly crushed, where no sleeve will technically work, or no patch will actually cover the area, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to splice. What that means is cutting out the damage completely and replacing the tubing with another piece of tubing. So that would be considered to be a splice. There's 3 different varieties of splices that can be used for tubing. It depends on the location of where the damage is at. In some cases, if you're trying to minimize warpage from heat, there's one particular splice that will work better for that. In some cases, if you're trying to avoid lumps and bumps that might show beneath fabric, one of the splices will provide for not too much of the weld bead showing, so that it kind of conceals the bead and has less of a bumpy appearance underneath fabric. But at least a little bit different than some of the other types of repairs. So there's one type of splice that's called an inner sleeve splice. And basically what you've got is something that looks like this. Maybe you've got a piece of tubing, you've got cluster welds on either end of it, like this. Okay. So you've taken out the piece of tubing, and what you do is you scarf cut the ends of the tubing, like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fabricate inner sleeves that go inside here on both sides of it. And then you're going to have another repair element, another piece of tubing that bridges the area like that. So that would be the inner sleeve method of repair. So you've got 2 sleeves that you're going to fabricate out of tubing that slide into the original stub ends. And you're going to have another piece of tubing that bridges the area between the cluster welds. And we call this method of splicing the inner sleeve method of splicing. It gives you a relatively smooth finish after you're done, because all that's really visible would be the butt joint of the one sleeve. Actually, it's the lap joint of the original piece of the sleeve to the piece of tubing that you used for the repair, and maybe a couple of rosette welds that kind of stick out from the tubing, and that's it. So it conceals the welded repair area. I'm going to show you a video in a little bit that shows you the making of this type of splice. But again, this is just one version of splice if you're trying to give a somewhat of a smooth appearance after the weld has been completed. But it's a splicing by an inner sleeve method. There's another method that's called an outer sleeve method. And what this one does is it just has the sleeves, but rather than use them on the inside of the tubing at the stub ends, the sleeves are on the outside of either end of where the cluster welds are at. And they've got a piece of tubing that bridges between the cluster welds. The ends of the tubing are usually square cut. And but again, there's kind of a drawback with using this type of splice. The problem is you're going to have a lot of weld beads that are going to kind of show. But again, sometimes you can do it. But anyway, that's splicing by the outer sleeve method. There's another sleeve, or another type of splicing method that doesn't use reinforcement too much, or it just has a piece of tubing that bridges between the cluster welds that have been created. There aren't really any internal or external sleeves. It's just an outside diameter, a larger piece of tubing that has a larger inside diameter that will accommodate the butt ends that have been cut off on the original pieces of tubing. And there, with something like this, you have to have enough clearance in order to be able to slide the new piece of tubing on. So if the cluster welds are too close to each other, it's not going to be possible to slide the sleeves on, or slide the outer sleeve over an area and then bring it back into position. So sometimes if you're working in an area where you've got limited space between the cluster welds, you're not going to be able to use this type of splice. But it's sometimes used on engine mount repairs where they've got inadequate clearance around cluster welds. You can do something like that. It uses scarf mount cuts. It uses rosette welds in it. But really, there's no sleeves involved. It's just a larger piece of tubing that bridges the area between the 2 cluster welds. So that's it. Here's a picture that kind of gives you the overview of each of them. The inner sleeve method, you've got 2 internal sleeves inside of the stub ends. You're bridging the area between the cluster welds with another piece of tubing that's the same as the original. Splicing by outer sleeve, as the name implies, you've got two sleeves that cover or bridge the area between the cluster wells with an inside diameter piece of tubing that's just been square cut and done. That requires the greatest amount of heat. There's also going to be some damage or potential damage from warpage. You've got a lot of welding going on with something like this, so be prepared. If you don't have adequate clearance between the parts, you can create a lot of warpage when you use that method. And then lastly, if we're trying to control heat with the least amount of welding, well, this would be suitable like for an engine mount repair. They use an outslide member in order to kind of bridge the area between the cluster wells. Requires the least amount of welding, so we're trying to hold alignment for an engine mount where maybe the connection points have to be precisely located. Well, that would be probably the choice of types of splices to use for engine mounts. So splicing with a larger diameter tube. Okay. Here's some pictures that came out of a different book that kind of show you the details of using this inner-sleeve method. It's time-consuming because you have to fabricate all of the internal sleeves and the bridging sleeve or the bridging piece before you can do any welding. So it requires quite a bit of work. Here's the inner sleeve method, really showing you one of the sleeve or the internal sleeves. You would have a mirror image on the other side of it. So again, this just shows you one of the inner sleeves and the continuation of the bridging element that goes between the cluster wells. Usually 30-degree scarf cuts are used in order to make the new tubing fit into position. And again, it shows you one half of the repair. So again, you've got an internal sleeve. There's a trick of the trade too that you might want to remember. You're going to have to locate that inner sleeve and position it. And what they do is they use the rosette holes in the tubing in order to kind of use a pick in order to get the sleeve positioned where it has to be, in order to insert or at least get it located where it needs to be. In the video that I'll show you, they'll show you how to do something like that. The other thing you might do is you might want to tack maybe a piece of welded rod to the sleeve, and you can pull it through the rosette hole to kind of locate where it has to be. But it does have to be positioned between the area that's been cut out for the splice and the stubble. So again, it has to be positioned correctly. And again, here's a sample. So they've cut out the damaged piece of tubing, and they've got the stub ends that are left. What you're going to do is you're going to fabricate a new piece that looks like that. But you're also going to have to fabricate internal sleeves that go into each end of it. So those are going to be hidden after the repair has been done. And there's one of the internal sleeves. And it's going to have a lot of rosette wells to kind of hold them in position. The outer sleeve method, they use external sleeves on this particular type of repair. So again, you can kind of see what it's done. The stub ends are cut square. And again, the part that goes in the center, it just matches the original tubing of what's been cut away. You've got sleeves on the outside of it. So again, you've got a stub length of one is longer than the other. This allows you to slide the sleeve on and get the sleeve in positions. So here's the replacement part. And again, you've got external sleeves that got rosette holes in them. That's going to be placed at each end of the repair.
Is there some sort of jig or something that would be used to make sure you're not messing with the alignment?
No. Well, again, you could use a jack, just like I showed you. If it's being done on aircraft where it's done in place, just use a jack to hold the rest of the airframe in alignment. And again, those are the external sleeves. External tube only, well, again, for something like that, they usually cut one stub end a little bit longer than the other so that they can slide the sleeve over one end and then pull it back the other way. But this is how they do it. So there's a piece of tubing that kind of came out of it. So they've just got a piece that bridges both of the areas. They slide it on one end and then they pull it back the other way. But again, you have to have enough distance between the cluster wells in order to allow you to do something like that. So if you've got a short throw or a short distance between these two, it's not going to be possible to pull the sleeve back fully one way, you get a split over on the other side of it. So there's dimensions that are specified for the length of that particular splice. There's another patch that can sometimes be done to tubing. This is really not a splice. This is another type of patch. If you've got a cluster weld and there's a dent in the bottom of the cluster weld of the line you're on, it can sometimes be repaired by a welded patch plate. This looks a lot like a glove. That's about the best way to describe it. There are fingers that extend up on both the vertical and the diagonal sections of the tubing, and what it does is it gloves the repair area. This can be fabricated, or the patch can be fabricated out of flat stock. So what they do is they take a die grinder and they take a piece of flat stock 4130. They create holes at the webs of where the fingers are at, and with a drill, and then just create the fingers with a die grinder. It takes a little bit of practice to do it. I've got a sample of that. I'll bring that in at break to kind of show you how it's been done. Yeah.
If you're having issues with those fingers breaking off, commonly they're breaking off, did you use that patch to strengthen that weld?
No. No. In that case, you're going to have to do a repair of the individual diagonals and verticals that are actually broken. This is only used when you've got a dent like in the bottom of the line.
So in order to repair one of those individual diagonals, you're not supposed to weld over existing welds to use back on the tubing?
Well, you're not going to like it, but I'm going to show you what you have to do. Something like that where you've got a damaged cluster, that's what you're going to have to do. The simplest solution would be to get a new airplane. You're not going to be able to patch that at all. You're going to have to cut the entire cluster away and then create sleeves that kind of will bridge the area. So what they do is something like this. And there's a procedure for actually doing something like that. They're trying to control expansion contraction the best that they can. So you can see that they tack weld the vertical in place first, and then the diagonals are positioned, and then weld it around, quarter weld it. And then it looks like that after it's been done. But that's how you fix it. It's only used for dents in the bottom of the line. There's a limitation for most of the repairs. You know what they tell you for something like this? This is used for a dent in a cluster. It's not used where you've got a separation in one of the diagonals or verticals. So only a dents really. Okay. So anyway, you've now been exposed to the repairs that you can do in tubing. A lot of times also, we've talked about fuselage type repairs where the tubing has been used, but understand that all of the repairs that we've talked about, if the aircraft has got a tubular steel landing gear like a lot of American Grumman's do, like the Tigers do in the AA-1 and AA-5 have, all of these repairs are done on tubular steel for landing gear. Commonly on a lot of the Grumman aircraft, what happens is they rust out. There's very poor drainage in those aircraft, and the repairs that you're doing are really the same repairs that you do on the airframe, except the damage was caused by rust that created a hole. So again, you're really patching to correct the problem that was created by rust. What the FAA wants you to know too, life might be easier if they allow bolted sleeve repairs. It's possible, but you can't do it unless the airframe manufacturer specifically says that you can use a bolted repair. When you drill holes in tubing, you're substantially weakening the structure of the tubing significantly by drilling that hole. Even though you're filling the hole up with a bolt shank diameter, it's not the same as it originally was. So unless the airframe manufacturer gives you the okay by saying so in their service manual, you can't use any bolted repairs. The only exception would be an approval by the FAA to do such a thing. So again, bolted repairs are only specifically authorized by the manufacturer of the FAA. That's it. Okay. Landing gear, again, If it's just going to be 4130 normalized tubing that can be repaired, no problem. All the repairs that I've shown you generally will work for something like that. However, other landing gear, different story. If it's an oleo strut, you're dealing with fits and tolerances between the cylinders. So again, any type of repair by welding, generally not approved to do. So oleo struts generally can't be repaired in that method, using that method anyway. Same thing with spring steel struts. Spring steel struts on aircraft are heat-treated 4130. They're cracked. You've got a big problem. They're usually replaced at matched sets from the airframe manufacturer. You can't buy just one. So you're going to have to replace the spring steel strut. Also, you should know something else too. Those spring steel struts are usually treated by shot peening. The shot peening process is a method of stress reduction in the steel structure. And any type of finishing work that's done to that, maybe removal of rust by any other method, it may weaken that particular structure, so you have to be very careful around it. If you have to blend a little bit of corrosion out or a little bit of rust out of it, sometimes you can significantly weaken it. But most of that structure has been heat-treated 4130, not repairable by welding. Same thing with the axle assembly on a lot of oleo struts. These are usually made out of nickel steel and not repairable by welding. So again, oleo struts or stub axles or heat-treated spring steel, generally not repairable by welding. The only repair would be by replacement. That's pretty much it. That's all. Okay. Something else we might want to talk about too. We briefly talked about the concept of normalizing and repair work. There's a lot of people, myself included, that believe that after welding has been completed, the structure should be re-normalized, and I believe in it. It's quite possible to do that with an oxyacetylene torch. You need a larger torch tip. You need to heat the area up until it's bright red and hot and cool and still air. However, if you're welding by an inert gas welding process, the TIG welding equipment does not directly permit normalizing tubing. It's a dedicated type of welding process that will weld, but you're going to have to normalize later. Some people say that they don't do it, but again, if I were TIG welding or MIG welding, the tubing, I would come back to the oxyacetylene torch and I would normalize that area before I return the aircraft to service. So again, just for stress relief. Any questions you might want me to talk about? Anything at all? Have we been in here for about an hour? Yep, about an hour or so. Why don't we take a break for about a half hour? I'll show you